diving into the pages I built. Okay. And also, I guess I didn't just book them, but I written them as well. And so the ones that shape my healing journey, things that I hustle about, and what is considered my own higher calling, which deals with God specifically. And if you're not a big fan of God, then maybe you need to get a little closer. So these are not just books, okay? They're just not. They're simply pieces of my own journey, things that I've been through that are considered truths and not beliefs. All right, so this is episode, I want to say 9. So as I flip through my notes, and so the courtroom is where most of this episode takes place. It takes place there for very few simple reasons. And so it's around 60 memoir. And it tells you about dealing with courage and how dealing with courage is not for everybody. And that's actually something I'm beginning to see as a kind of sort of redundant theme, especially through court. And what does that mean? If you ever notice, most people aren't really going to deal with the courtrooms, and sometimes it's really focused on dealing with certain type of, how can you explain it? It's like when you know you have to not only really be in the presence of something that dictates what took place, but you have to do so sincerely. That's where people get tripped up at. It's difficult to maintain a facade when you're in front of yourself, when you're dealing with what it is that you think about, especially when you know what your own thoughts are. That particularly speaking. And then if you even hear things as well, you can kind of sort of choose what resonates and then take that and place it into your character when you're dealing with the courtroom. Because even when you're dealing with court systems, our court systems are extremely flawed. And that means that people can be overworked, so they may not really understand as well. Maybe their sleep was off. Maybe they're too overworked. Maybe, you as a persona in there, you don't believe in what you think about hard enough. So people are going to easily feel like, and this goes for everybody that's around you. It doesn't, people just assume it's one entity that goes just this or just that. And that's another reason why so many people fail to have courage, because it's not. It's family, it's friends, it's colleagues, it's co-workers, it's drivers, it's other motorists, it's all, you cannot get around it enough. It's yourself. It's all things embodied in one. And when you have those opportunities to really face those things, it's really going to show you what you're made of. So I've always been like, people are scared to not only want to voice that opinion or see what that is like or see what that thought reveals or unfolds while you're going through the midst of those type of ideas, especially with the courts. Because it's rooted in things like, only blacks are going into prison, or nobody likes the black female, which I'm not going to be the entity, because we all know that racism and slavery and discrimination on those things definitely exist in our world. And it's so sad, because most of the time we actually encourage it, right? Most of the times we want to actually see somebody else fail, and that's why we're around them. And again, but what about that says that you're a courageous entity? Nothing, right? And so you gotta be mindful. People sense that, they can pick up on that. As they say, the Bible has a really great scripture when they're like, the devil's out and he's looking for somebody to devour. If you're the entity that's most likely doing that, 9 times out of 10 you're a nice appetite. Okay, so grit and high heels, that's definitely a biggie. And we were talking about this the other day, and people were saying what entities, which everybody has a unique stitch, and as long as I like to call it, the proper term is niche, and when you stick to the niche, that's ultimately what puts you on. And so people always want to get all up in your face and feel like you are, you want to be copied, or I'm gonna do this just because so and so did it, and that makes you a copy. It's the difference between you want to constantly copy somebody else's work, like plagiarism, instead of being original, unique to who it is that you are and what you think about. That's hard and that's difficult. And so when I have other entities around, our background was rooted in style and fashion, and it's not about being more stylish than the other. It's more so about how you can rock with what it is that you have and possess in order to make it beneficial. And that's ultimately what having a purpose is about. Sometimes people don't always want to be bothered with what they think about, and I think that's kind of sad. And I don't see how you can get sadness from courage either without reaping sadness in return. And so as you sow, this is also what you reap. Even in the court system, if you go in with a stinky attitude, most likely you're going to be the same way. It's really not even about anything else at that particular point in time. It's really your attitude, and that's ultimately what puts you on. because people are going to try to change it. People are going to try and deter you. People, and they think it's fun. They think it's funny too. That's another problem when you're dealing with the courtrooms, especially as you walking around in high heels and you styling and you doing what it is that you want to do. You know, people are going to notice that, and they're also going to choose to notice so with a bit of a hint of, oh, I bet take this person down a peg or two. And y'all know that type of entity right off that. And so when you think about what that means for yourself, because as you go into these courses, I saw a girl the other day and she was so adamant about how things were constantly giving her the blues and issues when it comes to dealing with her student loans. And I was like, wow, because it was almost as though she really got it. And some people just really do. Sometimes people just understand so much. Shout out to Indiana, y'all. Speaking of them style sisters over there, boo. But seriously though, you know what I mean? Sometimes the heaviness of dealing with school is a kind of sort of like a wake-up call, you know what I mean? And sometimes we gonna just sleep on the call, or we gonna constantly go head on and try to figure out what else it is that we want to do out here when we get to this school. We gonna listen to our teachers. Usually they got so much more honest that what they say is normally interesting. And the fact that the pressure of, like, Dave Ramsey is not about like just totally going through all the loans. Oh, you know, we need to, he has a really extreme viewpoint. That's true when it comes to dealing with how you want to go about dealing with what it is that you want to do when it comes to dealing with pursuing the educational system. Now, the educational system is really a spot where I feel like I've really learned some things about myself, where I really had moments to really see who was cool, who not, and without that opportunity, I wouldn't have been able to do those things. So I definitely hold it in high regard when it comes to dealing with ideas such as that. But what another issue is monetary. Every time the loan forgiveness issue, and it's sad because Biden was so adamant about giving everybody a clean slate or wiping whatever slate was clean, and then all of a sudden it was reneged. So then it's so odd because you go to the black people, again, speaking about slavery and all those issues, but you so black, but your skin color says otherwise. But that's what you want us to think. That's what it is that makes sense to you because you're in a position of power. And so now we have to look back and kind of sort of adjust those thoughts moving forward. So the young lady was angry. I say all of that to say that it resonated with anger. It made people get upset and angry. And sometimes anger is a great transmutional force to make things happen. And sometimes people go back and forth with anger. People will say that if you got something to say that's some kind of anger, then it's best to do it if you did it with a swear word. Or, you know, if you're mad about what necessarily takes place, it's best to kind of sort of heed what some of the quotes are. Because not only is quotes beneficial to what you think about, but if you sincerely believe it, then it just amplifies it. And so when you think about what that is going to entail for what it is that you kind of sort of want to express, I choose to consider those type of thoughts. And so as you kind of sort of transmute what takes place, because having so many loans in place to obtain something that you feel is supposed to make your life as an improvement, it really can sucker punch us when we feel like, and I'm grateful that I wasn't really like trying to just follow and just get all hyped up, because you know, that impatience was like kind of sort of irritating. It's like we get so hyped up that we just, oh, we're so excited. We were so excited that we want it today and tomorrow. And that impatience builds, and then eventually we lose the very thing that we thought was going to solve all of the problems. And that's ultimately another problem. So even for an example, a guy who was dealing with some kind of educational thing, and he did something and then he lost everything, and it was kind of sort of like a very shocking for because you never assume that this is something that's even going to take place, or even if that was even an issue. But when it brings that type of idea to light, you're like, oh Lord, okay, so now you can understand that. But again, when we're dealing with the pressures of having so many things going on, you assume that by having this particular item that it's going to make everything 10 times better. And then you have to realize, like, oh wow, well, why are you being so stubborn, or why is this entity making it? And so when that young lady was saying what she did, it was like, oh, okay, so you get it, you understand. So now that you have an understanding there as to why everybody makes things so much harder, whether it's through jealousy because they don't have that type of idea, and that's the worst for real, and it always stems back to Jesus and why slavery is such a negative thought. even when you deal with the ideas that you have to understand that we needed this or we needed that, and that's what our country is built off of and our backbone. But sometimes some things is against our will, and that's ultimately really where the sacrifices lie. It's really about, okay, well, if I'm doing this, then I expect to be compensated somewhere else because I'm doing something out of my heart when I didn't even necessarily need to have did that, and that was something that I really was not able to have did, and I didn't even want to do that one particular thing and pinpoint it. And make sure that once you pinpoint that exact problem, it's allowing those type of things, even if it did form out of anger. Because you have to find compensation in the things that take place. If you're getting something and you expect something in return for that, you're not getting that, it has to get compensated from somebody. And every time somebody stubbornly chooses to kind of sort of throttle or withdraw or go slower on purpose or whatever else, it builds and it intensifies. And eventually it's a cause for something that you put somebody in such indebted position to where you're whatever the unseen mental force is. It puts things into a certain order. And how can it not? If you go through all of those efforts, if you go through not only dealing, like, just I'll give you an example for being out on the roads. There's so many times where people have wanted to run me off of the road, but I've held on to this driver's license indefinitely. There's nothing that nobody can say about that.
It's trying to shut people down. That's what it does. And that's disruptive.
I have no issue with telling anybody what it is. That's just what it is. And if you, and truth be told, if you didn't want to hear what something is, then why did you do what you did that made it how it is and made it what it is? So those are just things to think about. So you have to stand firm in the things that you believe. Seriously. And when you stand that tall, you will notice your spine is cool. You know, people rub all up on you if it's a little stiff, so it's extra straighter at this point. You know, then here come the fold, so you needed it to begin with, right? You gotta learn how to whoop ass, and you're not gonna do so with a crooked humpback all day. You need to be as upright and on point as possible. That's just what it is. If you're not gonna do that, then you're gonna always crumble. And then authority dressing with stakes that are always going, well, you know what, because when things are really high, it's the same thing as having a straight spine. You're gonna dress the part every time. So authority means dressing when stakes feel high. That's what it is. Your spine is straight, your outfit is fly, your thoughts is on point, your skin look clear, everything around you is on deck, what you're thinking about is transpiring, the haters is falling. You don't have a choice but to compensate for what it is that took place. Whether they choose to hate on it is only going to crumble what's inside of them, and that's easier for you to get done what it is that you need now. And so that's ultimately where everything kind of sort of can have a semblance of balance. And personally, there's nothing really that's gonna top being able to kind of sort of think as highly as you do about yourself and even those who are around you. I don't really think anything is wrong with that either. And you really don't want to disappoint. I don't really see what the point is in that either. Truth be told, it kind of sort of just feels kind of icky, and that's again can goes back into the very same thing of dealing with how you want to kind of sort of think about what is considered for conversation, and think about it. Think about what you want. Think about what really aids the bomb of what took place, and manifest that, and make sure that, you know what I mean, you believe it, because ultimately that's really what counts. And you know, I was reading that the other day that a person was usually there about things or whatever else when encountered. And notice both. Notice who is and who isn't. And then, you know, act accordingly. I don't think anything is wrong with that. For real, you know, that's probably what's best, so you can really maintain your focus. And sometimes people, speaking back to that same thing, especially with court battles, people not gonna show up either. You know, people are gonna choose their selves repeatedly, because we're, like I said before, we kind of have a selfish nature and culture and nation. Young nation. We, you know, and I don't really think that's a positive thought to have all the time, but we might go down a little bit. But that's necessarily, so to speak, just a reminder as to what it is that you're not really choosing to emphasize. You know, altruism, philanthropy, being a woman who's a benevolent, you know what I mean? Being so inclined to help entities that are lesser is ultimately a true characteristic of the angels and the gods, and that's not what you want to fall short from. So thanks for spending time inside my story. And this book spoke to your spirit, please leave a comment. I love to hear what line linger. And don't forget to subscribe for more truths from the books that built me. And remember, your voice belongs on the page too. And I'm out. Bye.